So tonight I'm going to talk about the MK Ultra program and its effects on the development of Tantra within the United States, and with a broader scope, the esoteric aspects of popular culture that influenced global culture. So, Project MK Ultra began in 1953 under the guidance of Sidney Gottlieb. And it was a program that was designed to explore the use of certain techniques as methods of interrogation, as well as population control, and the creation of, what were essentially mind slaves that could be utilized by the state to perform specific tasks. Now, when I say that, it sounds fucking crazy, and a lot of people may have heard of MK Ultra from, certain right and left wing political commentators who have emphasized some of the conspiratorial aspects of the program. And I'm not going to talk about the Illuminati or any secret society or anything like that, because I don't really have to. I'm not saying that those organizations wouldn't possibly exist or have some influence over a program like this, but the fact is, what we have documented about MK Ultra is enough to expose the depth at which the United States government explored the utilization of what are essentially yogic techniques in developing mind control programs. So this is not a discussion with a lot of speculation. I'm speaking from information that is publicly available. And if you want to know more about this program or any of the things that I say about it tonight, this information is widely available. You can research, cross-reference what I say. I'm not going into the realm of conspiracy here. I'm just discussing the facts about what the program was designed to do, the effects of the program, and the unintended consequences, which was the eventual opening of America's third eye. So, Project MK Ultra ran from 1953 to 1973, and eventually most of the files concerning MK Ultra were destroyed. So, who knows what else the program directors may have been involved in. The thing about MK Ultra is that a lot of the funds for the program were distributed to independent organizations who then utilized certain techniques, namely the dosing of LSD, in order to experiment on members of the public, often without their knowledge. So, LSD was one of the primary drugs utilized in the MK Ultra program. And this drug was developed by Albert Hofmann in 1938. So, LSD within Tantra, we utilize it as a psychedelic that will bring you to the state of subtle space. So, subtle space is the experience of consciousness where you are tapping into dimensions beyond the material. So, we're dealing with the realm of the metaphysical now, everything from the mind up in terms of the chakras. And so, the chakras that are most affected by LSD are the Vishuddhi, the throat, and the Ajna, the third eye. Now, when you take LSD, most people, when they experience LSD, what they're experiencing is a opening of the third eye. So they're experiencing inner vision, but they're also piercing the veil of consciousness between dimensions. And so you have an integration of the metaphysical with the physical. And you can call this hallucinations, visions, whatever you want to call it. But what is experienced is an overlay where you are within the physical world, but you're seeing things that are immaterial. Okay, and that is what we are trying to access when we're practicing third eye yoga, when we're trying to access that point. We're trying to experience that metaphysical space that you can access with LSD, but you don't have to utilize LSD to access that space. You can do it without drugs. There are many methods that you can utilize to achieve this. Now, if you want to quickly and efficiently place someone within the condition of subtle space, so the experience of the metaphysical within the physical simultaneously, you can utilize a drug. And so you can sidestep all of the years of practice that most people have to engage in order to be able to access that space. Now, what makes this so potent in its applications as a truth serum or a mind control drug is that most people, when they experience subtle space, this is so far from the base material consciousness that people will experience in their waking life, they don't know how to navigate that condition. They haven't been trained to navigate that condition. When you practice Tantra, you can develop the ability to navigate subtle space and not be so overtaken by the experience. But it is an extremely disturbing experience for someone if they are exposed to a drug like LSD and they don't know they've been exposed to it, or if they've been exposed to the drug and they're not prepared to take the drug. So in that condition, you can manipulate the consciousness of the person who is under the influence, and that was the goal of MK Ultra. So, as I said, Albert Hofmann developed LSD in 1938, and Gottlieb, who was working for the CIA, became very interested in the use of this drug. And so he had the CIA purchase the entire supply, global supply of LSD, and immediately began to utilize the supply in social experimentation. Now, MK Ultra was not the first United States government program that explored these types of methods. We have Project Bluebird, which then developed into Project Artichoke. And what was so wild about these programs is that they were explicitly developed to create CIA mind slave assassins, which sounds completely fucking insane, but it's true. The United States government was trying to create basically zombies. And there were zombification rituals essentially being conducted. Now, of course, they were being conducted under the name of psychology and therapy and modern medicine. So you can see them in a somewhat palatable form. But essentially, this was black magic that was being performed by the United States government. At any other time in history, this kind of activity would have been labeled black magic. And these are magicians just under a different name. And so they're utilizing techniques that were known by magicians, witches, tantrics for thousands of years. They're utilizing these techniques in order to create zombies. And all of this comes from Project Chatter, which was established in 1947, and that was the first use of LSD for the control of test subjects by the CIA. Now, something interesting, and if you explore Tantra and you explore the chakras, you'll find that there are many synchronicities in the things that are associated with the chakras. People who've never been exposed directly to the chakra system, the Indian tradition, or Tantra, will utilize this symbolism unknowingly. So if you think about how LSD is associated with the Vishuddhi, and the Vishuddhi is the throat chakra, which is associated with the color blue. It's associated with the mouth. It's associated with sattvic foods. It's associated with birds. So what are the first three programs that led up, a lineage of programs that led up to the formation of MK Ultra? We have Project Chatter, which deals with speech, an aspect of the Vishuddhi. We have Project Bluebird. So birds we associate with the Vishuddhi, generally. We associate airiness, air, the wind, with the mind and the Vishuddhi. And so you have Project Bluebird. So you have the blue and the bird. And then you also have Project Artichoke. So you have this sattvic food, the sattvic guna associated with the Vishuddhi. So it's just a funny little synchronicity there that you can identify in association with these programs. Now, this theme of utilizing aspects of sattva in order to control the population continued in offshoot programs. After MK Ultra was established, we had MK Search in 1964, and within the MK Search program, bird migration was utilized as a potential platform for chemical warfare. So you're literally weaponizing birds. Okay, so there's obviously a specific stream of consciousness that we find within this lineage of programs. This is a deep exploration of the use of the mind and the integration of the spirit in order to control, to attack, to confine, to do some pretty serious damage, and a lot of serious damage was done. So I'm going to speak specifically about Sub-Project 68, which was directed by Donald Ewan Cameron. So Cameron was a very interesting man. As I said, MK Ultra funneled money into a lot of independent projects. You had a lot of these. This was kind of like the Wild West of psychiatry at this time. This was before the really intense regulation of the practice that we have now. And so you had a lot of people doing a lot of crazy experiments with drugs, with tantra, with Buddhist mantra. There's a lot of different experiments and a lot of experimentation that was taking place in these independent organizations which didn't have much oversight. Now, Sub-Project 68, as I said, it was directed by Mr. Cameron, and Cameron was actually one of the psychiatrists who performed an evaluation of Rudolf Hess at Nuremberg, which is very interesting. Cameron had a really strange relationship with Germany. He wrote some pretty serious papers criticizing the nature of the German people. He argued that Germans naturally had tendencies towards fascism, basically. And so his idea was to utilize social manipulation through psychiatry in order to change the condition of the German man so that you could eliminate fascism from the German character. So this is some of the earliest writing in serious applications of psychiatry to control an entire population. And this is open. You can read this. You can read Cameron's papers. And he was associated with MK Ultra. So he utilized the concept of psychic driving. Now, psychic driving was a program where you would place someone under the influence of a drug like LSD. LSD was utilized primarily in this program. And then you would repeat mantra. You would repeat mantra in order to program the mind of the subject. This is psychic driving. Okay. So Cameron's idea was that you could do this with individuals and you could create mind slaves. You could program them with a specific mantra under the influence of psychedelic drugs, and they would do your bidding, or they would perform some function. They would give you information, whatever. But you could train someone through this. Now, this is very similar to the way that Yoga Nidra is utilized by my guru Satyananda. Of course, he wasn't trying to create CIA mind slave assassins, or maybe he was, I didn't know about it. But he utilized Yoga Nidra in order to program the minds of individuals so that they could stop smoking or stop drinking, or he even taught languages to people in Yoga Nidra. And the way that he was able to achieve this was because he was able to utilize meditative practices to bring his subjects to the state of Turiya, which is that dot at the top of Om, and this is the portion of consciousness that is beyond Maya. So you're no longer attached to guna. And in this space, the mind, if you don't know how to operate it, you don't know that you're being put in this space. The consciousness becomes quite malleable. And if you trust your guru, um, that's not a problem because then you can access really intense states of samadhi and you can gain great power uh, through that practice, great cities. However, if this is being used for the wrong purpose, you can do a lot of damage. So Cameron, for example, his test subjects experienced things like amnesia, incontinence. They lost the ability to speak. They forgot they forgot members of their family, and they even began to perceive their interrogators or the directors of the program to be their parents or other members of their family. So you can see how powerful these methods are, and Cameron had only limited knowledge of the Eastern tradition and how you could possibly integrate that. He was operating on the foundation of modern psychiatry, but you could see, even with that limited foundation, he was able to do some really incredible things. And so the idea of behavioral scientists acting as social planners, this is something that Cameron really pushed. And the idea of integrating drugs into social planning. So, in our contemporary society, this is a commonly utilized method for controlling populations. The popularity of psychiatric drugs, but also just any kind of recreational drug that can put someone in an altered state of consciousness. If you can get someone in an altered state of consciousness and they don't know how to operate that altered state effectively, there's certain things that you can do to their mind in order to drive them towards a specific outcome. That is the principle of psychic driving that Cameron explored. So we have a direct line between the CIA and Cameron, who developed this um, system for psychic driving and social manipulation based upon that principle. And we see now that that has generally been integrated into our society. There are a lot of talking heads who promote microdosing of mushrooms or, you know, saying that everyone should take LSD, everyone should take DMT, we should all have these experiences. And these drugs are extremely powerful gateways to altered consciousness. We use them appropriately within the practice of Tantra. We don't just take these drugs without considering the consequences. And we would say that most people should not take these drugs because most people should not have a third eye awakening, which is really just an intense concentration of awareness to the ajna. Most people, when they experience this, it causes symptoms of schizophrenia. It leads to psychosis. And so we don't want to put someone in that condition where they don't know how to handle, they don't know how to navigate their altered state of consciousness. But if you're operating a system of social control and social planning like Cameron, like the MK Ultra program was developed to explore, if you're operating that kind of a program, then of course you would want people to be in a condition where they have an altered state of consciousness and they don't know exactly how to operate it. Now, we have this program established for exploring the depth at which you can access altered states of consciousness utilizing psychedelic drugs and then employ methods like mantra, uh, hypnosis, meditative techniques in order to create what is essentially a mind slave. Now, we know that what is occurring here, based upon the principles of Tantra, is that you have the movement of consciousness from the mind, the solid grounding base in the mind, up into the third eye. And when you reach third eye consciousness, then you have this communication between the realm of spirit and the intellect. This is a very difficult realm to control because most people never advance beyond the material realm in terms of their understanding of the laws of the universe. When you interact with guna and maya, which are material manifestations, you accept a shared reality that is being constructed by all things that exist within that material realm. And so there are certain laws that are formed. If I cut my hand, I'll bleed. If I drop an apple, it will fall due to gravitational force. But that is because our awareness of consciousness is confined to materiality. As you advance further away from that material foundation, then the laws of materiality bend a little bit. You start to work in the area of the abstract. We can experience this in our own mind. We can think about abstract things that could not possibly exist in the material world because we're operating in a space that is detached from those aspects of Maya and those aspects of Guna. We might be entering into Sattvic Guna, but Sattvic Guna is far more flexible, far more malleable than Rajas or Tamas. Things become more malleable as you get closer to transcendence in the Sahasrara. Okay, so under those conditions, it's very difficult to control the outcome, and that's why a lot of these experiments in the MK Ultra program went horrifically wrong, because you just can't really control what people are going to experience in their mind to that degree, especially when they start communicating with the spirit. So what happened as a result of the MK Ultra program was the development of a cultural revolution that was unlike anything the world had ever seen up until that point. And there are certain figures that are participants, that are known participants, or it's generally agreed that they were participants in the MK Ultra program that were absolutely pivotal in the development of this cultural revolution. So we have, for example, these three major figures: Ken Kesey, Allen Ginsberg, and Robert Hunter. All three of these men were involved in the MK Ultra experiments. That means that they went to a facility that was operated by some aspect of MK Ultra. They were given LSD. They had an experience that caused a radical shift in consciousness, and this had a major impact on their art. So, just to demonstrate the depth at which LSD had an effect on Ken Kesey and directed him towards the awakening of the third eye, I'm going to read his description of his LSD trip under the MK Ultra program. By the way, before I read this, Ken Kesey was the author of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, the classic novel, and he also was the director of the Merry Pranksters, who were a group of uh, radical individualists, basically, who went across the United States on a bus trip, and they had these happenings, which were basically tantric rituals, where people came together and they experienced altered consciousness, and they broke through into new areas of consciousness. So let me read this description of LSD from Ken Kesey. He said, "Sit back, picture yourself swooping up a shell of purple. With foam crests of crystal drops, soft nigh, they fall into the sea of morning, creep very softly mist, and then sort of cascade, tinkly bell-like. Must I take you by the hand ever so slowly type, and then conglomerate suddenly into a peal of silver vibrant, uncomprehendingly, blood-singingly, joyously resounding bells. By my faith, if this be insanity, then for the love of God, permit me to remain insane." So what is being described here is a shift into a realm of absurdity. And we actually associate the ajna with the color purple. So when he talks about the purple with foam crests of crystal drops, we're talking about visions visions of things that we would associate typically with subtle space. And then the idea of detaching from sanity. Like I said, there is this grounded aspect to the mind, which we find in the Vishuddhi. And when you detach from that groundedness in the mind, you could say that you're entering into the realm of insanity. And through that realm of insanity, you're perceiving the divine in spirit. I just actually had a really good question on here. Is that why AI generates image in mostly purple? I actually didn't realize that if that's the case, that would make sense because artificial intelligence does enter that gray area between spirit, which is the unifying aspects of consciousness. You think about how AI develops; it takes information from many different sources, and so spirit coming together and then filtered through the mind through some kind of intellectual matrix in AI. Yeah, it's likely that if that is the case, then yeah, it would make sense that they would generate images in purple. You think about the prevalence of certain light aspects of light in our culture. So, but as I said, we associate blue with the Vishuddhi. So when you are sitting in front of a screen, you're exposing yourself to blue light. Now, for most people, that does have a radical impact on consciousness. If you're exposing yourself to consistent blue light, within Tantra, we would say that you're bringing yourself closer to the Vishuddhi, or you're drawing your awareness to the throat chakra. Now, if you're exposed to something like ultraviolet light, that would have a different effect. If you're exposed to green light we use for seasonal affective disorder because it's associated with the anahata, and so it connects you to rajas. It gives you more energy. So yeah, within the context of uh, light and the generation of images, it would make sense if something comes from the nature of the ajna that it would have some aspect of purple to it. Uh, but anyway, there are many examples of artists applying this kind of imagery after they've experienced LSD. Allen Ginsberg, the famous beat poet, he wrote an LSD poem that he recited on. Well, he famously recited on the Firing Line show with William F. Buckley. It's really good. You can listen to the whole thing on YouTube. Um, Ginsberg was really interested in the use of LSD as a meditative supplement. So when he began to explore LSD through the MK Ultra program, uh, he was allowed to listen to records while he was dosed with the drug, and so he would listen to Buddhist mantra. Now, Ginsberg later said that his experience with LSD through the MK Ultra program caused a lot of paranoia. He was obviously picking up on the spiritual energy of the program itself, and that was something that was detrimental to him. But he also benefited from the fact that he had this awakening of his third eye, and so he was breaking free from the control mechanism of the the matrix, the intellectual system that determined right from wrong, the petty morality of the West. You have to understand that all of this comes from a mental matrix. Abrahamism is a mental matrix. And so, if you want to break from it, it's important to get out of your head, to lose your mind, to go crazy, to drop out of society. And once you're able to do that, then you can observe it from a distance and you can see just how absurd it really is. In fact, there is no reason for you to follow any of those rules other than just accepting the system for what it is or at the point of a gun. And so with Ginsburg, he had this sudden realization of the depth of the just how absurd society really is. And he had no interest in continuing with mainstream society. So he started to explore how to utilize LSD and also different modes of meditation in his art. By the way, he wrote the epic poem Howl. If you haven't read it, it's very good. Ginsberg was part of the Beat movement, and the beats were sort of like proto hippies, proto punks. It was a very rebellious movement, and it was heavily integrated with jazz. Um, the MK Ultra program, by the way, had an unintended consequence of leading to, or at least influencing, the development of free jazz in the United States, because Ginsberg was hanging out with all of the jazz musicians in New York and the major jazz musicians, and he was supplying them with mushrooms. He was supplying them with LSD. There was a very strong connection between the psychedelic movement and music early on. And so you have the creation of this music, the music of John Coltrane, of many different free jazz artists that push the boundaries of expression. And we saw the pushing of the boundaries of expression in all modes of art after this period. The beats had this profound influence. They took influence from the tantrics in India and in Tibet, and they also took influence from the CIA. Now, it just so happens that the CIA are inadvertently some of the greatest music producers of all time, because they gave us Robert Hunter, and he was the primary songwriter for the Grateful Dead. Now, the Grateful Dead have had such a profound influence on the development of art all over the world, not just in the United States. And it's not just the music, but it's the way that it's produced, because there is this radical underground, totally outside the norms of straight society approach that the Grateful Dead used in creating their records and creating their following. The Grateful Dead, when they play, or when they played, they would have this caravan of people following them, and then they would set up, and it would be like a fucking city. It would be like its own little environment. And you had people taking care of each other. It was a very communal thing, um, but also extremely individualistic, and a great embrace of free expression. You have people who are fans of the Grateful Dead that are all across the political spectrum. So this music appeals to the free spirit, and it was heavily influenced by Ken Kesey and Robert Hunter. Ken Kesey, when he would have these happenings, the house band for the happenings was the Grateful Dead. The Grateful Dead was associated with the Further bus trip, so the bus that Ken Kesey took across the United States. It was titled Further. Basically, the destination that they put on the bus was Further. So the whole idea was, how far can we go? How far can we explore consciousness? What can we access? What can we find whenever we free ourselves from the condition of petty morality in the mind that has been programmed into us? Now, of course, the original intention of MK Ultra was to program people with even more petty morality, to make them even easier to control. But like I said, whenever you're dealing with subtle space, it gets difficult to control the outcome. And you can end up with this massive accidental expansion of consciousness. We have the Beats, we have Jack Kerouac, Allen Ginsberg, William S. Burroughs experimenting with drugs, being influenced by the availability of drugs thanks to the good old CIA. And they take everything that they learned from those experiences and they influence the hippie movement. The hippie movement was a major threat to the system. Now it's been sort of whitewashed and turned into something completely different, but originally the hippie movement was a great threat to straight society because it was all about radical individualism and it was about dharma. And yoga was integrated into the hippie movement. And white people in the West getting interested in the Eastern tradition and yoga is not something that the system wanted to happen, because that is a major breach of control. You know, in a system that's based upon send your kids to school, program them all fucking day to hate their life. I hate every waking moment until, oh, the bell rings. Now I can go. I'm free. I have this one free moment of release during the day. And then after 18 years of that, uh, of programming, finally in your 12th year of school, you're fucking released, and then you go get a job, and then you hate your job all fucking day, and then, oh, the bell rings, now I can go, and you have this big release. Everything is drawn towards the outcome. Everything is drawn towards the orgasm. And that's why people get so obsessed with the orgasm, and they can't even enjoy sex, because they were trained from a kid to just accept the fact that their life is shit and it's always going to be that way. Now, the whole aspect of sexual liberation in the hippie movement was about breaking free from that kind of mundane routine in the social order that was programmed into you, and is programmed into every single one of you listening to this. And you can get rid of it, but it's been programmed into you. The whole idea of taking a break from that system, dropping out of it completely, dropping acid so that you have the guts to even drop out to begin with. Because you're not going to start thinking about the possibilities outside of the mundane world until you start to release your mind from the confinement of the wizards that have set laws down for you in magic books which influence every aspect of our culture. The entire modern capitalistic system is based upon extracting as much sexual prana from you, redirecting all of your sexual energy. You're fucking miserable during the day. All you want to do is eat, sleep, and fuck. That's what your material body is demanding. But instead, they slot you into this position where you're totally alienated from your labor. When Marx was saying that you were alienated from your labor, he was saying you're alienated from your muladhara. He was saying that you're alienated from your physical body. You're alienated from the physical tools that you utilize in production. And that causes you to become a miserable fuck. And then when you go home, after your hours of being miserable and the bell rings and you have your metaphysical orgasm and are released from your confinement for the day, and you go home and you can't even fuck your wife because you don't know how to fuck, because your entire life has been devoid of any sort of pleasure and has been one aspect of social conditioning after another. Thank you, Dr. Cameron, for your fucked up bullshit that you have then injected into all of our children and have continued to inject into all of our children. The feminists are right whenever they say that this is a fucking rape culture. It might not be in the same condition that they have presented it, but it is. When you are forced to go and perform an act that you don't want to perform, that requires use of your sexual energy, that is rape. These motherfuckers know how to gain access to your sexual prana. Okay? When all you want to do in your material body is fuck, eat, and sleep, but you're told you're not allowed to do any of those things until the bell rings and we say you can, then your body is naturally going to direct all of that energy to escaping the maze that you've been dropped into like some kind of rat. You've been dropped into a maze like a rat, and you're forced to find a way out. So you're going to use all of that energy in your balls or your pussy to get the fuck out of the maze, because you don't want to be a rat in the maze. You want to be a free human being who is allowed to have fun and not be alienated from their labor. But you wouldn't know that unless you became aware of it. And most people can't become aware of this fact until they disconnect from all of the programming that has been injected into their mind. And thank you, CIA, for spreading LSD all over this country and releasing great artists like Allen Ginsberg and Ken Kesey and Robert Hunter, so that they could then influence the development of the greatest art that has ever been produced, by my opinion, the greatest art that has ever been produced in this country's history, in this world's history, so that we could have the development of the beat movement and the hippies and the punks. And any of you motherfuckers who go online and you put up pictures with yourself with your fucking fingers up and you say fucking shit on the internet, and you can look at a picture of a woman's tits anytime you want, and you fucking love it, and I know you do, you should thank the Beats and the hippies. You should thank that wonderful Jew, Allen Ginsberg, and all of his buddies. You should thank all of these people, Janis Joplin and Jefferson Airplane. You should thank all of those motherfuckers that have been produced by the wonderful CIA and all those blundering assholes who totally screwed up their vision for the future and gave us LSD and these liberating movements. Thank the punks and all those degenerate motherfuckers with those non-binary haircuts for bringing us to this point where we can have this kind of open and free expression. And now I just want you all to know, as a final statement here, in 2 weeks, I'm taking a bus across the United States with a bunch of other degenerate motherfuckers who are going to spread the same kind of absolute anarchy and radical individualism across the entire United States, as you should too. This is an example to all of you. You don't have to take LSD if you don't want to, but if you want to, do it. But you don't have to, because now it's not in the CIA's hands. It's in your hands. It's in my hands. And we can do whatever the fuck we want. We can release ourselves from mundane society. We can live in a world where our lives are not directed towards the accumulation of prana in our fucking balls, so that we're then raped by our boss every day and he can extract all of our resources to empower himself, instead of doing what we should be doing, which is to empower us as individuals, becoming gods